All right. Let's move on. Who do you want to talk to next?
Let's talk to Relic.
Yeah. Relic is a reliable caller, and we're glad for that. Relic in Texas. It says what you're calling about in the notes doesn't think the belief in afterlife is inherently harmful. Relic? What?
Hey, Eric. Hey, Z. Hopefully I sound a lot better to y'all today. I'm trying a new setup, so there's there.
Well, it sounds beautiful to me.
It sounds so good. Like, I love it so far. I've been spending as much time as possible trying to clean your audio after the show. It's going to be much nicer this episode. So, cheers.
Okay.
So, Relic, you want to talk about the harm of believing in an afterlife? Is that about right?
Is the belief in an afterlife inherently harmful?
Yes.
I don't necessarily believe it is, because I'm not going to pretend that there isn't like a way to like make it harmful, but to say that believing in an afterlife at all is a harmful idea, I don't think that necessarily follows.
Well, let's see. If you think that someone is going to live after they die, I think that could drastically influence the way you grieve that loss. I think it could drastically influence the way you treat people. I think there are plenty of people who did wrong by someone who passed and are hoping to make amends and apologize in the afterlife. And since I don't believe in an afterlife, I think you're robbing yourself and them of the opportunity to do that while you still have, while you're still alive. So I feel like things get left undone. And then on top of that, because we don't have any reason to believe that there actually is an afterlife, you wind up grieving twice. Because if you find out that it wasn't true, then they all died again. And this time you're not going to get to see them. And it's something I've seen so often that I think that it's inherently harmful. V has been wanting to chime in. Yes, V.
So I think that this line of argumentation is dangerous for two reasons.
Okay.
The first reason is that this is very Christian-centric, this argument. For example, I would argue that reincarnation is a type of afterlife. Mm-hmm. So you die and then you come back to life as someone else, something else.
Yeah, and that is also inherently harmful.
But the reasoning you just gave doesn't hold up to that version of it, because there's no guarantee that you're going to meet the same people that you met in your past life.
Absolutely. It's inherently harmful for another reason, actually. It's inherently harmful because it is used to uphold a caste system. If you are in a lower rung of society, you were born into it, you deserve it. It's used to justify the segregation and subjugation of a people.
Some versions, for sure. I think though
that's enough.
Well, is it though? Because it's the second component there, the second piece where this could become concerning for me is, what if we pointed to a few people who said, there is no afterlife, therefore we are not important enough to continue living, or this life is all we have, and that means we're finite and not important, therefore I'm going to go on a murder spree. Like, there are people who will take any ideology, any worldview, and turn that into something harmful.
That sounds like whataboutism.
No, it's the concept of, hey, every belief could be taken to an extreme that is harmful. Mm-hmm. Some might be more predisposed to that, in which case we can have that conversation. But saying this is harmful because what if some people think this other thing could be applied to anything, and so becomes not a useful argument about the afterlife for me.
I hold on. Is this a pragmatic argument about the usefulness of believing in an afterlife, or is this an ontological statement about whether or not it exists?
No, I think that we can't make an ontological distinction about whether or not the afterlife exists based on how it would impact us.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is the reason that you're giving for an afterlife being inherently harmful could be applied to anything. Therefore, your statement, in order to be consistent internally, would have to be any belief system about death is inherently harmful because some people could take it to a harmful place.
So what if I amended that to inherently dangerous?
Then, I mean, it still applies.
I don't think so.
Relic.
Is driving a car inherently dangerous?
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean that everybody who drives a car gets into an accident and gets hurt?
No.
So where's the inherent danger if a couple people get hurt?
I'm very confused now. That might be me. Relic, I do want to hear what your thoughts are here, though, because I don't want this to be a two-way conversation.
No, it's perfectly fine. And you know that, Eric and V, I respect your opinion and I value your sides of this argument. From where I am, and you know I have a belief in an afterlife, but I used to believe in an afterlife under a different belief system. I used to be a young earth creationist. That is just what I was born into.
Yeah.
And that I would see as inherently harmful because it's not belief in an afterlife that's making up a scoreboard and how much you can do before you get to go to the next place.
Yeah.
In the way that I treat the afterlife now, it's you honor the living as well as the dead, and that it's not a matter of will you see them again because that's a matter of cosmic occurrence or cosmic fate or what have you. But if people passing on, you can honor them just as well when they're here as much as you can when they're gone.
I agree.
It doesn't necessarily have to be something that, like, for instance, like the car scenario, isn't inherently dangerous if not everybody gets into a car accident every time you get behind the wheel. And there's those few that I'm going, I don't think that follows exactly because it's not like that. It depends on the religion you're born into or the type of beliefs you were taught about the afterlife. For instance, Islam and Christianity is very different from someone like myself who practices paganism or shamanism or druidry. There is a lot more hands-on with the living instead of trying to follow your book to its conclusion.
So I don't know.
What about let's come up with a hypothetical religion where the afterlife is a thing and you get to engage with people in that afterlife.
Okay.
So it is similar in that you go to a place and you meet the people that you knew in real life. But there is an emphasis on if you meet somebody who you did not speak kindly to or act generously towards or have empathy for in that afterlife, that is an uncomfortable situation for you and for them. Therefore, the doctrine of this imaginary religion was to make sure that you acted with as much empathy and humanism as possible in this life to avoid that discomfort in the afterlife when you saw them again.
So I will absolutely accept that. I just don't think that matters because you gave an example, which is fantastic, of a way that it would work.
Right.
I'm not saying that it doesn't work all of the time in every situation, but I am wanting to outline and underscore the inherent danger of the belief itself. That not that it could be okay, but that there's always going to be a danger there. There's always going to be, some level of danger or harm that you could suffer from. Honestly, I think that it rises above the level of room noise. I think that promising something to people that they are not going to be able to benefit from is a sucky thing in every situation.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it, Relic.
I just want to push a little bit back on this because in that manner of thinking, isn't every ideology inherently harmful?
Inherently dangerous, most of them, yeah. There are a couple that are, true-ish.
Thank you.
I don't know.
That was my point. My point
I've got to think about that.
Yeah, because here's the thing. I think that an afterlife is not something you should believe in because it is unfalsifiable. And there is no way to determine whether or not an afterlife exists because you don't get there until you're dead and then you can't report back. So for me, the reason I reject an afterlife is not because of its harm, but because if I'm being consistent with my view of the world and how I synthesize information, I can't accept it because it's unfalsifiable.
Actually, that's a really good point. Relic, I've been talking about the effects of believing in a thing, not whether or not that belief is justified. Mm-hmm. Are you under the impression that the results of this conversation could justify believing in it? Like if we were to walk away from this and you get reinforced this idea that, a belief in an afterlife is not inherently harmful, does that make it more likely to be true for you?
Okay, so this is going to be in 3 little parts, and I'm going to make sure to keep them to just quick points.
I asked you like 5 questions. If you can keep it to 3 parts, I think you're doing solid.
1, I don't think it justifies it. I don't think that it immediately justifies it. Does it reinforce my belief that it's not inherently harmful? No, it doesn't, because the way I've come to it, I believe I come to it through first-hand experience. So that's what solidifies it for me, because I know it's there and I interact with these things. 3, I just don't want anybody to feel like because they have a belief in an afterlife that they're causing some inherent harm, or that they're holding some position that is inherently harmful, because I think that point in itself is incorrect and uncharitable.
Fair, but it makes for a really good starting premise for an argument. And it's fun to have. You may be right about the whether or not there's inherent harm. I think I perked up a lot more in hearing you saying that you have experience in afterlife because you deal with these things. Mm. There's so much meat on that bone. The fact that we've been fighting over the scraps of this other part of the conversation kills me. So can we dive into that much meatier thing?
If you want, I'm not.
Yes, absolutely. Relic, what afterlife did you interact with? Why do you believe that was what you experienced? Like, lay it out, because that's very curious.
Okay, so first thing, I want to point out that I didn't call in for this fact, so that I'm not prepared to talk about this, but I'm more than willing to answer any question.
Would you rather call another week and have time to prepare?
No, I'll go off the cuff. I'm not scared of talking about my beliefs.
Okay, I'm not trying to bully you into it. We do have, the show is going to keep going. So if you want to have this conversation now, I'd be happy to. Okay, so
ask me anything.
Okay, what did you experience? If we could put it in a nutshell.
I already talked about Freya once, I believe.
Yes.
And Freya was sort of my gateway to these experiences, because when I first started, at that point I was an anti-theist and had been an anti-theist for 2 years. Atheist experience and Arnrald being my bread and butter, and me reading up on the foundational falsehoods of creationism or whatever. I forget the name of the book.
Yeah, Arn's book. I've got it in the other room. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good book, and it's a definite heavy disapproval of young Earth creationism and creationism in general on that level. But when I had a literal goddess walk into my room in front of me and my wife, having both of our attention, and then she proceeds to start talking to both of us, it kind of threw me for a loop.
So, V, can we make a note to put the link to that clip
I always
under this? That way people who want to watch that call can catch up on that?
Yeah. For anybody who's curious, anybody who calls in multiple times, all of their former calls are always linked in the description. So you have all of the library of all of that.
V's the one who does that, so V, thank you. Okay. So Relic, I'm sure you know that we don't believe the whole a goddess walking into your...
Oh, of course.
Right. So what would convince us that you experienced an afterlife? And if it wouldn't convince us, why does it convince you?
Okay. One, I'm not expecting to convince you. I don't think I really can. This is something that just happened. Like for me, it happened to me, and I had this experience. And like I said before in another call, I don't hold any ill will or like some sort of like, I don't hold anything against anyone who doesn't believe in any sort of afterlife or anything. The thing is that something interacted with me, and that is why I believe in it. Through like secondary things. For instance, she led me into shamanism in general and druidry, respecting nature, journeys, and that sort of thing. And it's been an incredible experience. I have talked to multiple types of spirits, have interacted with multiple types of spirits. And it's something, yeah, I understand it's a little wild, but...
I'm not hearing anything about an afterlife yet, though. That's kind of what I really want to know about.
Are the spirits your proof of an afterlife?
No, when you go on these journeys, you do travel into that spirit world.
Okay, so...
In my belief system, you can literally, if someone were to pass away, you could literally sit down and try and go speak with them.
Okay, so like the...
Got it.
Like the Odyssey.
Or like Kat Kerr.
Well, we both went very different directions with that analogy, but yeah.
More like shamanism.
So Relic, have you heard of Kat Kerr?
Actually, no, I have not.
Okay, I'm so sorry I'm going to do this to you.
No, it's fun.
Okay.
Go on.
So Kat Kerr is a YouTuber and a pastor who fancies herself a prophet of God. They've written multiple books about how they've been to heaven, how they interact with angels, how they've interacted with Jesus, how Jesus made them time travel to them back to watch all these different events while Jesus was traveling with the apostles. She has incredibly specific, detailed accounts of really, really funky heavens.
Apparently, Christopher Reeves teaches you how to fly like Superman.
Yeah, if you've seen The Good Place, where everyone learns to fly, that's essentially it. But Christopher Reeves teaches you.
Yeah.
There's so much there, and it is pants on head crazy, dude. I highly recommend you look it up just for the laughs. But would you take someone like Kat Kerr seriously?
Two things. One, it depends. It depends on the religion that someone along that side subscribes to, and if that doctrine that they subscribe to comports with reality. For instance, Christianity is mostly debunked from the beginning onwards to water being pre-existing before how the cosmos created everything being out of order, yada yada yada, into infinity, the flood.
Right, but Relic. I like that definition of it would be disproven if it did not comport to reality, or rather, you would believe it if it did comport to reality. Correct. But I feel like there's this, I don't know, like the things you are describing feel very much like they're in that same vein for me.
Not so much for me. I think that Kat Kerr's nonsense claims, because I honestly, if you watch Kat Kerr and you are convinced that they went to whatever weird wonky heaven, like they do guest appearances to tell people what they're going to experience after they die, and there are just like the public transportation system. I mean, it is really, really detailed. Is unfalsifiable.
So,
it's
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's unfalsifiable. You could not check heaven to see if Kat Kerr was right. It just infers that heaven is real, and that, because of that, it falls in the same category. It's not as funny when you say it, though, because while Kat Kerr sounds very, very meaningful, it is, super, super detailed, and you haven't given us a lot of details, but that's where it seems similar to me.
One of the, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was saying that's where it seems similar to me, though, and I don't take Kat Kerr seriously, and I don't think you should take Kat Kerr seriously. I'm not taking what you're describing as seriously, and I don't think you should either. And so that's why I'm butting up against this. I know it sounds rude, but I'm trying to be consistent. I'm trying to...
Oh, no, I completely understand, Eric, and I don't want you ever to think that, like, I'm thinking that y'all are trying to dunk on me. That's not what this call's about. This is about dialogue.
Yeah.
I can give you one solid proof that threw me for a loop, and it's the thing that actually sent me over the edge.
Okay.
For instance, when I was journeying, yes, I'm going to call it journeying, but when I was journeying...
Were you doing any drugs, by the way, or meditating?
No, I don't do any drugs. I don't drink. Call it leftover indoctrination from my last actual drug.
Okay. Well, what about, is it a form of meditation? Is it like a sleep?
It is a form of meditation, but there is a little bit of, oh gosh, I don't want to really say it, but I'm going to go to, because it's honest. There's a little bit of mysticism attached to sitting down, lighting up the candles, getting your drum and going to this place. But I want to share something that happened to me, and you don't have to take me on my word for it, and that's perfectly fine. But this is something that I believe happened, and it's something that did prove it for me. I was journeying, and a man approached me wearing this weird attire, and it strangely, curly hair, tall dude, had a hat on, and he led me to one of my guardian spirits. I ended up seeing him a second time, and I finally got curious, and I said, hey, who are you? Because you've been here twice now, and I keep seeing you, and you keep coming to me first, so what's your deal? And he just looked at me, snorted, and said, I'm Diomedes, and let's leave it at that, and then went on, like with a bit of a huge accent. And I didn't know who Diomedes is. And so I'm there, and I Google who Diomedes is, and there is a statue of Diomedes, and it is exactly as I saw him in the journey.
Is there a chance that after seeing that statue, you may have revised a little bit what you remember?
I never encountered that statue before, and I swear I have not changed a single thing about it. But once again, you can't take my word for that.
Well, and also, here's the thing. There are two parts. The first is a whole lot easier to go at, and that is that as time passes, especially if you're trying to look for those similarities, you find them, and it becomes a whole lot easier over time. It is not a you thing. It is not a dishonesty thing. It is a human brain thing. Right. It just happens.
His name was spelled exactly how he spelled it to me.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So the other piece of that is I have done stuff like that. When I was on my spiritual journey before I landed on atheism, I would meditate, and I would both meditate with and without the use of drugs. One of my favorites was Salvia Divinorum. I'd get a sitter, I'd meditate for about 3 days, and then I would, take salvia, I'd smoke it, and I would, as you're saying, journey. My experiences are some of my most favorite experiences that I've ever had. That said, I don't think that they're real. I take them as experiences, sure, but they're not ones that map to reality. And because of that, I put them in a different category, and the same has been true for, meditation-induced things that I've experienced. I've thought that I was flying, and the, subjective experience of it, I'm not going to deny that was fantastic, but did it map to reality? No.
Can I ask a question?
Anything.
Relic, you said at first that you met Freya, and now you're talking about Diomedes. Are you suggesting that there are multiple pantheons that are simultaneously true? Because they come from completely different polytheistic religions.
Well, Diomedes doesn't come from any religions. He was a general.
Well, in the Trojan War, which is
right.
part of the Greek and, Greco-Roman mythology.
Well, I don't necessarily. Okay, so two things. First of all, when Freya first came to me, I asked her. I was like, "Okay, your name is Freya. So, are we talking what? Are we talking Norse mythology? Like, are you telling me that Thor or Odin or all of them are real? Because this is sort of absurd." Was my actual wording, and she looked at me, snickered, and said, "Not exactly. From what she's told me, she is not Freya as described in Norse mythology. She is the spirit that Freya was based upon."
So what you are saying then is that, and this is just me interpreting, and I know that this is you interpreting something that you say you've experienced. These different gods and heroes and characters in these different mythologies are actually not those gods, but are spirits in the underworld that you have come across?
No, the only one from Norse or anything like that I've ever come across was Freya, and she said, "No, not Norse mythology. I am the idea that character was based on."
It kind of sounds like a blend of what was the caller last week?
Idealism?
No. They belong to a very specific religion that... Baha'i.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of like a mix of Baha'i and kind of a Jordan Peterson-esque kind of...
Well, here's the thing. I am very curious about where these experiences intersect with, say, my friends who are Norse pagans, right? So
right.
That would be an interesting conversation to have with one of them about, hey, is Freya actually a goddess? Is Freya a spirit who I've interpreted as a goddess? Is it just the embodiment of nature? Like, the problem, Relic, here is not that I don't believe that you have this experience or that you believe it. The problem is that I'm getting a different version of this goddess from you and from my pagan friends and from my pantheist friends who utilize it, from my Wiccan friends who worship Freya as the embodiment of certain ideals in their witchcraft. Like, there are so many different interpretations here that when we talk about it, it becomes very tenuous, especially if, like you said, what we're looking for is something that comports with reality. We have no way of knowing if this comports with reality, and that would be if this was the only claim alone. But because we have so many conflicting claims
and
about
they can't
this
all
character,
be right?
Right, exactly. They can't all be correct.
So if somebody, if person B were to come from the other room and say, "I just talked to Freya and they told me that Relic's a liar," who should I believe and why, right? What criteria? If somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Relic, I just had this experience where I talked to a spirit," what criteria are you going to use to determine whether or not that person actually experienced it? Or are you just going to believe them on face value?
Okay. First thing, when you do ask them, if you ask them, I think you're going to find out that I'm probably more in line than you think, because there are a lot of sects of the Norse, back when I first started searching into it, that have already come to that conclusion that the gods are more tenuous spirits that the text was based on, and that they are honoring the concept of that god. In the second thing, how can I judge? I can't go up to every single person and be like, "Hey, explain your method to me, explain what you're doing," and that's not really fair, and I'm not going to take away from anybody's experience, because I don't know exactly what Freya's doing on that side of thing. All I know is how she interacts with me, and like I said, I'm not about to push that on anybody or tell anybody that this is what the goddess says. Believe me, she's not a goddess. She's a spirit. Do as I say, because that's when we start getting into Jim Jones territory, and I'm not going there.
Well, one of the best ways to make sure you don't wind up in Jim Jones territory is if you use a criteria that you can reliably count on to determine whether or not it's true.
Which is where we get back to, is the belief in the afterlife inherently harmful? As a belief, no. As a method for it, if you are accustomed to and make it a point to believe things that are unfalsifiable, that is inherently harmful, because that leaves you open to things. Right. So it feels like, but if you believe that as well, then do you think that somebody who is listening to this conversation would feel more justified in believing what the spirits that are unfalsifiable to anyone else are telling them? And would that cause harm in certain circumstances? Do you know what I mean?
Okay, then let me add one thing to my statement.
And then we're going to move on to the next call because
that's perfectly fine.
Because people took me up on the offer, and now we have a bajillion callers, and I'm very excited about it.
Okay, to the audience and to Skeptic Generation,
like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe. Buy the Book of Eric as many times as you can. Support the channel.
Link in the comment. Link in the description.
Yeah, but one thing: if you believe in an afterlife, if you believe spirits are talking to you, apply secular humanism to the spirits. If what they want is harmful, they're not worth talking to.
So I get where you're coming from. My advice would be, first, if you're hearing voices that are telling you to do harmful things, you need to get help.
Exactly.
That regardless, if you are hearing voices and they're not saying harmful things, you should probably investigate that.
So get yourself evaluated. Okay.
Well, not just get yourself evaluated. No, and just look into it. There are so many different possible causes for that experience to happen that if you don't look first, if you don't check all of the possible options, then I don't think you're justified in coming to the conclusion that the one that you want to be true is true. And that's tough. That's tough. And if you have a whole bunch of competing options and there's no way to tell, then the best answer is, I don't know. That thing goes in a bin of, I cannot rely upon that as a source for reality.
Exactly. So, and I just want to say one more thing to both of y'all. Thank you for taking my call as always.
Yeah.
And like I said, y'all guys rock. You're always respectful, and more people need to call into the show and see what's going on the atheist side if you're a theist.
Relic,
appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, and we're just going to keep pushing back on you because it's fun. Glad you keep calling.
Okay, that's fun.
Take care.
Have a great day.
Bye.
You too.